folks, welcome back to LMNOP Africa. This is Chris once again. Hey folks, welcome back to Chris Wyatt Africa on the LMNOP Africa channel, part of the LMNOP Broadcasting Network, once again on this Friday, the 19th of March 2021. Lekker Freitag. Welcome back, folks. Hope that you're having a good day wherever you find yourself around the world, whether it's here on the East Coast of the United States, out in the mountain states, or in Europe, Asia, or you find yourself somewhere in Africa, particularly South Africa. Well, once again, continuing the series of interviews with people involved in the worldwide rally for freedom and democracy on the 20th of March, 2021, tomorrow. Focusing on South Africa specifically. My guest will be on here in just a moment. I have another guest coming up after this, so that'll be Emma Kelly at the next stream. But right now, my guest is, sorry, I had to correct myself there. Shabnam Palesa Mohamed. She's my guest today, and she's from Sahiri, if I'm not mistaken. I asked my chat people, please stay away from the forbidden topics of certain cell phone networks and certain medications and offering medical advice, so my channel doesn't get shut down because of chat. I ask you for that. And with that, let me welcome my guest on. There she is. Whoops, that's not it. That's not her. What happened there? Sorry about that. Big mistake. There we go. All right, there we go. She's on now. If I can get her to take her mute off, and we'll be set.
Hello, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Fabulous. How are you?
Older.
Okay. Since yesterday?
Yeah, since yesterday. That's right. And that's a good sign. You know, usually if you can answer the question, if you're older, that means you're still kicking.
Right.
Anyway, well, welcome on the channel. I see Saskia Langeveld has just tuned in. She was a fabulous guest on No Notice the other night. I'm really grateful, and I understand she's with your organization. She was very helpful. Unfortunately, Debbie Ellis had to back out on me last minute because another event that she had that was pressing in order to make Saturday happen. She had to take care of that. So Saskia on No Notice jumped into the breach and was fantastic. Really enjoyed having her on. And I was supposed to have Thuli Kumalo on earlier from Soweto, but something happened. I don't know if her phone was stolen or what's going on, but it looks like her phone is on now on the network, just for people who are concerned about her welfare earlier. And somebody's reading her messages, whether it's Thuli or a phone thief, a mobile thief, I don't know. But I did ask the question, am I writing to Thuli, or is this a mobile phone thief? So you never know. Anyway, so listen, I'm looking, there you go. There you go. I got a little dizzy there. I felt I was in space. The International Space Station. Elon Musk had launched me on a Falcon 9 rocket.
Oh, yeah?
No, as you turned sideways there, I was like, we're floating in space. Yeah. So let's get right to it. You are a lawyer, I understand, and you are you the founder or the, I don't know, what's the right term, the organizer, activist, CEO of something called Sahari, yes?
Right. So I'm an activist, a journalist, and a lawyer who practices as a mediator. And relevant to this conversation and tomorrow's event, I am the founder of Sahari. So South Africa has a right to ivermectin. 100,000 strong movement, absolutely brilliant in 2 months, as Saskia mentioned. And the CEO of Transformative Health Justice, which focuses on health activism issues beyond ivermectin. As you know, South Africa has a healthcare system that's in coma and crisis and has been for a very long time. So there are physical and mental health issues that we will be focusing on as THJ.
No, absolutely. You know, and speaking of health issues in South Africa, we've long known that South Africa has a serious problem with tuberculosis and co-infection with HIV. But the first ever national survey, proper national survey, was just completed. And we found out that not only does South Africa have a problem with tuberculosis, but it's nearly twice as bad as in neighboring Namibia, which is shockingly high. This is quite disturbing. Over 700 cases per 100,000 population, which is mind-boggling. That is a massive tuberculosis load. The number of people who died in 2020 from tuberculosis exceeds that of Charlie 19. That's code word for a word that we can't speak, you know. But no, I don't know. YouTube is very capricious in what they say you can and can't say. So I was once.
Well, that's a nice word for them, Chris. Capricious. It's a very nice word for a word I prefer using, which is censorship.
Well, yeah, it is censorship, and but the videos on censorship I don't put on YouTube because they're not safe for YouTube. I put them on Odyssey and Rumble, so people can go watch my videos there. Ever since the events of a few weeks ago, but yeah, so yeah, but back to it. Tuberculosis, HIV. These are serious problems in South Africa, very serious problems. In fact, HIV, South Africa has the highest percentage or the highest number of HIV positive people on the planet. Not highest percentage, but highest number. It's shocking. Over 7 million South Africans are HIV positive that we're aware of. Pretty scary stuff.
It is, and I think a lot of these issues need to be discussed in the context of the fact that we have still structural inequality in our country, and economic apartheid is still very much part of how our country functions, especially in the healthcare system, where the majority of our people can't access medical aid, or if they do, it's a very basic medical aid. So the very poorest of the poor and working class, which has become a very big sector of society, at least 50% of our people are unemployed. Suffer from issues of malnutrition, not living in sanitary environments, not having access to water and electricity, the mental health issues that affect them as a result. So even these issues like HIV and TB need to be discussed within that construct, because otherwise you're just putting a plaster on, but you're not dealing with the actual wounds. And of course, our healthcare system is in a complete state of collapse. 40,000 nurses, positions have been frozen, even during COVID-19. There's huge issues related to corruption in the healthcare system, as with every other department, as it is in every country, really. I can't think of a single country that doesn't have these issues. But certainly South Africa and the African continent are very close to home for us. And we need to focus on health justice, not just health, but what is health justice? And beyond that, what is transformative health justice? How do we transform this health system so that it's people-focused, people-centered, and people make decisions about their lives?
Mm-hmm. Well, I get very nervous when I hear terms like transformative and social justice and things like that, because they've been so corrupted by people who have agendas. You're not one of them, I'm certain of that, but I get nervous about that. But one thing's for certain, the Band-Aid, which is what you're talking about, and that's the people who have agendas. So, for instance, when antiretrovirals became widespread, there was a lot of moaning that they were too expensive, which was a reasonable complaint. But a lot of people, particularly in South Africa, seem to think that simply having antiretrovirals was a solution. And it's not. I mean, if you are taking antiretrovirals, it's a lot more than simply taking a pill. Your CD4 count needs to be registered periodically. You need to see physicians on a regular basis. Your mental health, your diet, your stress, all of these things that need to be adjusted and moderated in order for you to survive, not just taking drugs. And it's always the Band-Aid. Oh, just give people ARVs. That'll solve the problem. It's not that simple. And what you're getting at is you're talking about some widespread disparity in access to employment, education, healthcare. All of that plays a role. And I think that if that's what you guys are trying to do and what you're going after, then I applaud you. Am I hitting on it right? Is that something you're concerned about? Now, we're talking about HIV, but you're talking about a bigger healthcare issue.
Structural issues. Our country is going nowhere until we fix the issues in healthcare.
It's going somewhere. It's going swirling the drain. Unfortunately, that's the sad part.
That's exactly it. And part of the problem is that, corporate greed is a very big issue. There's so much corruption. And I'll just talk about health for now. I can talk about any department or issue, but health specifically, there's so much corruption with suppliers, with pharmaceutical companies, with the prices of ARVs being overly inflated, adding to the burden of those who can afford to pay any taxes, never knowing where their tax money is going in the first place. But you're quite right, in terms of HIV, etc., unless you're dealing with the psychosocial issues and the socioeconomic issues of the individuals, you're actually not fixing anything. And actually, I don't think there's an actual will to solve the issue of HIV or TB for that matter, because it's simply too profitable to maintain it as a healthcare issue. If we were serious about it, most certainly people would have decent living conditions, clean water, electricity, the right to education, the right to psychological services for mental health issues. But we're not serious about it. All we're serious about is giving them overly inflated drugs until, I don't know when, but certainly the role of pharmaceutical companies has got to be addressed, not only in our country, but around the world, because what we're seeing, especially in terms of the V word, which word I won't spell out, is the capture of entire states. You would know, Chris. Yeah. Argentina was told, well, if you want our products, you got to give us your embassies, your reserve banks, your military bases. You got to transfer billions into our offshore accounts, and you got to give us indemnity if we don't deliver, if we're negligent, if we're fraudulent, if we cause harm. So this is a kind of corporate fascism that people are experiencing. All we're seeing is this wonderful PR image of pharmaceutical companies, but history and court cases tell us, Chris, that these companies have been found guilty of fraud, corruption, racketeering, and harm, and have been paying out billions when they get caught for those particular crimes. So I think in that context, it's very important for us to examine the truth, look behind the curtain, and understand who benefits from the status quo in which we live in healthcare.
Well, I think that's a fair assessment. You're going, in the interest of full disclosure, those know and follow my channel know that I do invest in at least one pharmaceutical company. I've done that for a long time. But you're talking about pharmaceuticals, and that's a fair approach. But also, I think, and you'll probably agree, but let me ask this question. I think we also need to focus on the state. The state failures are pervasive. Now, I come at this from an angle, I'm not sure, because we haven't talked ahead of time. I'm a small government sort of person. I think the role of government is to ensure a level playing field, so everybody has a fair chance. But a lot of people, especially in South Africa and people on the left around the world, seem to think the role of government is to make everybody equal. I don't agree with that. I think that's the wrong approach. But I think that a lot of people really get caught up in the role of the state, and they assume the state is responsible for things. And I think in South Africa, part of the problem, now, please, if you disagree, tell me, that the state is a big part of the problem. And then the failures are in large measure state failure because they have not fixed it. At least in Zimbabwe, under ZANU early on, then later ZANU-PF, at least they put a focus on healthcare, and they actually improved primary healthcare with general practitioners and nurses in the country for a period of time until they started stealing farms, and then it kind of went downhill. But for 20 years, things improved. But here, healthcare, in many respects, for all South Africans, is demonstrably poorer than it was 2 decades ago. It's pretty crazy stuff. And I lay a lot of the blame at the state. Would you agree or disagree with my assessment?
Well, I think, it lies in the Constitution and the kind of responsibility that was given to the state to provide access to the following. So housing, healthcare, education, etc. And, it's not really a black or white answer. The fact is that the state does have a responsibility because we appoint them, well, not directly, but, in theory. And so they're responsible for making sure that all South Africans or all residents who live in South Africa, be they South African or not, have access to these basic human rights, because ultimately the costs come out of the blood, sweat, and tears of the people. So it's not government money, it's the money and resources of the people, firstly. Secondly, of course, the state has been designed to be a managing agent for corporate theft, right? No political party, no government can run an election without corporate funding. And the corporate then decides, if you're going to get our funding to run your very expensive political campaigns, if you want to win, then you've got to do what we tell you to do. You've got to implement the policies that we tell you we want. And that explains so many of the problems in our country. And we've seen that time and time again, whether it's Steinhoff or the Guptas, or it's exactly the same thing. It's the pilfering of the people using the state as a vehicle. I personally advocate for, and a lot of people that I connect with, is people power. What we need is people power, decentralized. We need our municipality level to be able to make decisions on what happens in our municipality level, as well as issues such as healthcare, etc. I don't believe that any political party or any government is capable of giving the people what we want. It's organized in a pyramid system with the people at the bottom, right? And that certainly can never work. It never has, it never will. And so a new paradigm is most certainly needed that is focused on the power of the people is stronger than people in power.
Well, I think what you're arguing for, whether you doing so intentionally or not, is you're talking about a federal system in which authority is devolved to local level rather than being concentrated in a central authority. That sounds like what you're talking about. That's in theory what we have in America, and for most of our 2+ centuries we had that. But for the past century, there's been a concerted effort to consolidate control at the federal level, and the federal government has now become more powerful than the states, and our system is out of balance here. But in South Africa, you don't have a federal system, and so the local municipal and provincial authorities are dependent on the national legislatures and the parliament to provide funding in many respects and also to guide them. So is more of a federal alignment something you're talking about? That's what I'm inferring from what you're saying.
Well, certainly centralizing power has huge problems with it. It doesn't work. We've seen it time and time again. It's kind of like doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I don't know whether I would necessarily use the word federal. I would more think about it as grassroots-based, community-based decision-making, because when we start to use words like federal, then all of those debates come up. But if we say community-centered decision-making, that's what works. And the easiest way to do it, and sociology tells us this, is to move away from centralization and move to smaller communities And we could talk about municipalities and we can talk about districts. But certainly, I think that's the way it needs to work. And the people who run that district and municipality are not politicians. No, it's the people who live in that area and are affected by broader issues affecting society. That's the only way it can work. And of course, people have the skills to do this. We watch our television screens, we read these news articles, and we think, my God, what an absolute mess. I could do that. So we certainly have the talent amongst us to be able to make decisions about our lives.
Well, perhaps that's the case, but in the existing bureaucracy as it is, I would argue that in South Africa, there's not a lot of that talent out there. There are an awful lot of people who are woefully unqualified for the jobs they hold in ministries and in municipalities and provincial governments that are making decisions that have no understanding or no bearing. And part of your system is that you don't have a direct system of elections. Now, that's an assessment on my part. So I know I'm preaching to at least the informed. I don't know about the converted, but certainly the informed here. But for my wider audience, South Africa, nobody voted for Nelson Mandela or Thabo Mbeki to be president. Somebody did, members of parliament. But the members of parliament weren't selected by the voters. What? No, they voted for a party. You vote for a political party. And based on the share of the vote it gets, they get X number of seats in the parliament. And from that, they select the president. That's not even remotely direct election. And as a consequence, you get situations like where when the ANC, through a coalition, took control of the Western Cape over a decade ago, they deployed their cadres from Limpopo, from KZN, from Rustenburg, down to the Western Cape, speaking different languages, not being of the same ethnicities as the majority of the population, which is mostly colored in that part. This is just one example. And so those people weren't loyal to their constituents because their constituents don't matter. The party mattered. They answered to the Thule House, not to the voters. And I think that's a very serious weakness in the South African constitutional system. And it doesn't look like we're going to fix that. Now they allow independent candidates, but direct elections don't look their coming time any soon. Do you think that direct elections would have an impact on this? You'd be able to choose the people that you want to represent you, or would that just be part of the corruption? Because we see that as well in some countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a panacea or a silver bullet, but certainly we can build direct democracy in a way that actually works. We certainly can't do any worse than what we've had thus far. But coming back to the point that you've made about the ANC, for me, the two major political parties are two sides of the same coin. They serve similar masters and corporate funders who fund their election campaigns. This is why they don't want to reveal their sources of funding, etc. So it makes absolutely no difference to me whether we're talking about the ANC. For me, the measurement of any political party is how are the poorest of the poor doing under your watch. And whether that's the ANC or the DA, the poor are no better than they ever was. Just because I'm living in KZN doesn't mean I believe things are airy-fairy and wonderful in the Western Cape. I know they're not. Yeah. Whether that's the gang violence in the Western Cape or in the Cape Flats that's being perpetuated by sinister forces who have money to make out of continuing the drug trade and keeping people trapped in poverty, or it's the ANC or here in KZN, where the number of homeless people is increasing exponentially. People are just living on the street, giving up on life. For me, that's the measurement. So there's no difference between these political parties. They may appear to be a little different and talk a little differently, and perhaps in those parties there are some good people. But overall, the system is not set up. The way it's set up is to be self-serving, to be competitive, not cooperative and collaborative, and certainly not to care about the human rights and the basic needs of the people.
Now, if I infer correctly, what you're saying is that South Africa has a system that's established to take care of its elites, not its population. Okay.
Absolutely.
On that we can agree. Now, when you talk about your focus is on the poor, having been one of those people who lived in poverty, used an outdoor privy to go to the toilet as a child, fetched water from a cistern to drink, collected eggs, baled hay, and all that stuff, lived off of government subsidied free lunches at school and that sort of thing. As someone who's had that experience, now I'm not comparing poverty in Appalachia to poverty in Cameroon. That's not the same, or Bangladesh. Very different sort of thing. But nonetheless, poverty is poverty. It can be very wearing on the soul and the spirit. But but for me, you mentioned poor, but when I'm this isn't a criticism. I just want to make sure. I don't know if we have a different view, but when you talk about what the parties are doing, you went straight to the poor, and I think that's a consideration. But for me, it's for the entire population. How are poor doing? How are middle class doing? How are the wealthy doing? And we probably don't disagree. It's just that your focus is on the poor, which is fine. I just want to make sure that my viewing audience knows that that's my view. I suspect that you're very concerned about the inequitable distribution of wealth in South Africa. And without turning this into a political discussion, we'll switch back to the issue of the day on Saturday in just a moment. But is that a concern of yours? It sounds like inequality and wealth disparity is probably something that you're concerned about in South Africa.
Absolutely. When I say the poor, Chris, I'm talking about the poor and the working class together. I'm talking about the 90%. I'm talking to your audience. I'm not talking about the 10% and their puppets at the top. I'm not interested.
Okay.
I'm talking about
that's why it's important for clarification, because you and I are saying pretty much the same thing.
The middle class are debt slaves, Chris. Our middle class are debt slaves, right? So if you're a debt slave, if you're owing your life and soul to a bank, for me, you're poor. You think you're middle class, but you're not. So it's all of us together. And I think that understanding draws us towards each other as opposed to divides us.
Well, each month when I write an incredibly massive check, which is mostly interest on my home mortgage, I feel like a debt slave. So no, I'm a person that I've only bought 2 houses my entire life. I've never bought into the idea that a house is an investment because it depreciates. Yes, it can appreciate, but you've got to maintain it. You got to pay taxes on it. And even if you even if you buy it outright, if you don't pay the taxes, they take it away from you. So, anyway, so I've never been a fan of debt. I've always paid my credit card bills off every month, never paid interest on them, that sort of thing. But anyway, well, let's shift to Saturday. So you're an activist, you're concerned. Now, I've told people, I did a video which was on another platform because I didn't think it was safe for YouTube, but I think it's okay for me to mention this part of it. But Newsweek was the only news source in the U.S., and that's a very left-leaning magazine here in the U.S. that went bankrupt and came back and was even further left. So they haven't increased their viewership. But they ran a story about Saturday's events, and they call it a LMNOP Anonymous, and I'll just say that so we don't hit with the wrong phrase. LMNOP Anonymous right-wing white supremacy event of anti-vaxxers and people who are just a bunch of loons who are disgruntled. And that's the only thing I've found in the Western press. There may be more articles, but that was a couple of days ago. And so I've been interviewing people because from what I've seen, and this is where I want your input on this, please, is this is a group of people from all ethnicities, from all walks of life, from all over the world, but we're focusing on South Africa, who are hotful of capricious governance, of unelected, unaccountable bodies like the National Coronavirus Command Council making regulations and decisions, acting as if they have the weight of law, arresting people, suspending civil liberties, all over what they deem to be a correct response. And clearly it's proven not to be a correct response. So people are upset about the impingement on liberties. Now, yes, there are groups, some of them are anti-vax, some of them are on this kind of telecommunications with a sank I'll say that. I'm just trying to avoid, get in trouble here because I'm not, they'll say advocate. I'm not. But it's a coalition of a whole bunch of different people coming together. And if people look at the banners for each of the towns in South Africa, you'll see multiple groups that are involved in this. So am I correct in my assessment, or is this just a bunch of white supremacists?
Well, look, I think obviously pieces like those, journalism like that, is designed to be hit pieces. It's designed to create a particular perception that we're all crazy and we're all lunatics and we're all fringe and whatever else. I'll tell you what, if you haven't woke up to the fact that you're living in fascism, in particular during the lockdown, then I might want to question your sanity. I think it's those of us who realize that this is fascism. This is Orwell 1984 on speed, right? It's what it is. Those of us who see that are the ones that are trying to save each other. I mean, it's okay for you if you want to live in your little cocoon or bubble. God bless you. I hope at some point you realize that you are a human being. You do have rights, and you see that the greatest transfer of wealth from the poor, the 90% to the 10% is happening during lockdown. It is happening. And before you realize it, you wake up one day, open your eyes and think, what happened? And then we're going to say, but we tried to tell you, you didn't realize. So look, on a demographic perspective, because of data issues, Chris, which is a very serious problem in our country, given the inequity, that the masses don't have access to data to be able to be as aware about tomorrow's event as they could be. That's a reality. Yeah. So it's possible that you may not see a full representative demographic in each of the locations for tomorrow. It's possible. But certainly the word is spreading that the lockdown regulations are unconstitutional. There was a court case last year which found that.
North Gauteng High Court in June of last year declared virtually every aspect of the lockdown to be unconstitutional. The ANC appealed it, the government, and it's still waiting for a resolution. Yep.
Right. Right. So that's going to hang in limbo until I don't even know it. But can we afford to wait any longer when more and more of us are sick because we don't have access to treatments like ivermectin, because we've lost jobs, because we've lost businesses, because mental health is affected, all of these. Can we afford to wait? Can we trust them to do anything right? Whether it's the ANC or the D, I don't care. We can't trust them to do anything right. The only thing that makes sense is for us to take a peaceful stand, which is exactly what we're planning to do tomorrow. I mean, all of these events have people coming together with limited resources, putting all of their energies into it, bringing their passion to come and speak, bringing their skills in terms of music, and reaching out with a message that says, again, Ubuntu, I am because you are. If anything, lockdown has shown us that these politicians don't care about us. No. It's literally, the Michael Jackson said, they don't really care about us, right? Nope. Literally, it's about us, the people. So I think tomorrow's day starts. I have no predictions on what the numbers are going to be, nor does it interest me. We've had complications getting to tomorrow in any case, but we'll get there. For me, even if it's 10 people, it's 100, it doesn't matter. As long as we're there, we're making our voices heard, and we're reconnecting with each other, Chris, because that's been missing. We've been banned from gathering for the first time in our history, in particular political gatherings, and that's designed to repress the right to freedom of expression. It's designed to stop us from having those conversations with each other and saying, what is going on here and what are we going to do about it? So I'm certainly looking forward to it. As you pointed out, I'm going to be in Durban with my colleagues, but it's happening around the country. And I hope that the message and the initiative and the activities continue to spread. They may shift in terms of, form and style. You may have some toy, you may have some Zulu drumming. Great. Let's bring all flavors to the conversation and let's stand up for ourselves.
No, absolutely. This is truly, from my perspective, what I can see, a grassroots effort around the world. People who are not, a lot of people not involved in this sort of activity normally, but a lot of people are just really frustrated and have had quite enough of this nonsense. One of the reasons why I have a program is, just to let you know, a lot of my audience knows, but not everybody, because there's some new folks here. But I retired from active service in October 2019, not because I was done, but because that's the law. You can only stay so long. I was in the military for 36 and a half years between being enlisted and being an officer, 30 years as an officer as a max. So I retired as a colonel, and I decided to start a consultancy to try to encourage American businesses to get into Africa before we fall too far behind, because there's opportunity there for Africans and Americans. And then lockdown came along. And I was genuinely concerned, and we're almost on the anniversary of it. 27th of March, 2020 is when South Africa went into a draconian lockdown. And I was concerned about people's mental welfare, their health. And someone had suggested to me that I should do a live stream because they liked my videos, and I did it. Got some traction, and I could see that people tuning in with an alternative, something to listen to, was helpful. Avoid the isolation for those who had access to data and could watch it. And so I started doing these streams and I told people, I said, this is about a lot more than simply 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And ever since I've told people since they started that, I said, for human beings, I mean, we're social creatures. Now, some people are on their own, but if you can't congregate, if you can't assemble, if you don't have freedom of worship, you can't go to synagogue, mosque, to church, that has an impact on people's mental welfare, being isolated. Also, you have people who are abusive. If you put an abuser together with their family 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you're going to have gender-based violence. You're going to have rape. You're going to have abuse. You're going to have incest, which no one wants to talk about. I've been talking about that from the very beginning. And then you're also going to have an aspect which I was concerned about and I've been talking about, and this falls right into what your concerns are here specifically, although I'm sure the rest of that just did too. But my mother, who had lung cancer and fought it successfully for a year and a half, was receiving one of these new drugs, but you have to go to the hospital for the treatment. And she went to the hospital and got treatment. When the hysteria came and the scamdemic came along, she was no longer allowed to go to the hospital. So they referred her to an older medication, which she could take on her own. And within 3 months, she had cancer throughout her body, and she's dead now. She didn't die from COVID, but I think she's a victim of COVID because of political hysteria. All of that is what's happening, and people are blind. They're like sheep. They're not seeing it. It's crazy. So any comments on anything I just said?
Well, firstly, my sincere condolences on your mom. May her soul rest in peace.
Thank you.
But absolutely, I agree with you. And it's what I was thinking about earlier on during our conversation, in that, a lot of doctors will tell you that the larger number of people who are dying is because the healthcare system is broken, not from COVID.
Yeah.
They're dying because the healthcare system is broken. They're dying because people are too afraid. We had so many people approach us and say, my leg is rotten, it's oozing, I'm scared to go to hospital, should I go? And then we tell the person, you've got no choice, you've got to go to hospital. And then most recently I heard the very night the person went to hospital, they died. So we're hearing all of these horror stories. In my show, my radio show, I've interviewed doctors, nurses, scientists, etc. What the nurses tell us that they're going through is absolutely inhumane and insane. They don't have medication. They don't have proper oxygen. We know those ventilators are deeply problematic. We know medications like ivermectin, doxycycline, zinc, etc. were dispensed freely in India. In Uttar Pradesh, it's seen a steep decline in COVID. And yet our government and its corporate handlers say, no, you can't have it. So certainly people are too afraid to go to hospital. I don't blame them. I wouldn't go to hospital. I would treat myself with what I know works, like the drugs that I just mentioned, and of course, natural remedies that are scientifically proven. But people are living in terror, Chris. People are living in terror. It really is a trauma and a psychological trauma that people don't know what to expect next. I don't even watch these State of the Nation addresses because for me, they're all a bunch of nonsense. For me, I don't focus on what politicians are talking about. I focus on what us as the people, what we can do to help each other. Help your neighbor, help a stranger, work together, find ways, use your skills, whether that's in activism, in journalism, in law, in the arts, in medicine, whatever it is. We're in it on our own. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And we are the only ones that can turn around this fascism that we're actually living in. We've got to call it out. When you say scamdemic or pandemic, what I must say is that I do believe the virus does exist, right? But I also believe that the PCR tests are deeply problematic, have escalated the numbers and created this hysteria to drive particular agendas, corporate agendas. And then that has just led to innumerable issues in terms of unemployment, poverty, depression, etc., etc. Who's going to be accountable for that? So unless we take a stand now, we're going to look back, in another year's time and say, I should have said something then. I don't think so. The time is now.
No, absolutely. Folks, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel, part of the Indaba Broadcasting Network. Thanks for tuning in. My special feature guest today, talking about events tomorrow, the 20th of March, 2021, excuse me, I'm stuck in 2020, is Shabnam Palesa Mohamed. She's my guest. She's from Sahari, an organization that is focused on improving healthcare, among other things, in South Africa. And we're talking about the events on Saturday. I'm also making some notes here. Now, one thing I want to talk about here this has been going on for decades, though, and there's a lot of reasons for it. It's not just South Africa, but it's across Africa. And that's a shortage of nurses and doctors, but nurses too. And one of the reasons why you're shortage of nurses is because nurses are underpaid. They're poorly treated. They have less responsibility than other countries. And as a consequence, we profit from the broken system in South Africa. There are thousands of South African nurses working in America, tens of thousands working in UK and in other countries around the world like Australia and New Zealand because they go abroad for real pay, for real authority and responsibility, and actually to go to a hospital where you have oxygen and you have lines and you have and all the things you need to do your job. So this is I think an endemic problem in the healthcare system in South Africa is the fact that you can't retain or allow people in the medical profession to do what they should do as a medical professional. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There certainly is what we call a brain drain, people, very skilled people leaving the country. But equally, I think there's people who say we're going to stay because we love this country, we love this continent, and we're going to nurture, strengthen, and protect it. And that's important. But certainly it is an issue, and retaining the talent and investing. I mean, one of the nurses said to us that the training has depleted in a year from 1,500 intakes to about 40, if I remember those stats correctly.
Oh.
And she was from a trade union and said that, in a year's time, you're going to have hardly any qualified nurses in the country. So I believe this is a deliberate collapse of the healthcare system. So some corporates can step in and say, you don't know what you're doing. Let us take over your healthcare system. We'll run it for you. I mean, people like Noam Chomsky, etc., tell us that's how it works. Naomi Klein tells us the same thing, crisis capitalism. We hit you with a crisis and we capitalize on it. So that's exactly what's going on. And it requires all sectors of civil society to unite as never before, from the far right to the far left and everybody in between. Again, I'll come back to the point that we are the 90%. And it's very important for us to not be divided, because when they divide us, they conquer us. So these narratives that divide us when we see each other as different from each other, we've got to dissolve that and realize at the end of the day, we have the same needs and our blood is all red.
Well, that's true. It's kind of like the idiotic, endless talking of people who are focused on racism. There's only one race. It's a human race, Homo sapiens. We're one race. Your skin pigmentation and your features are artificial, and the difference between, say, you and I is so infinitesimal. Very little difference. The people that use that as a basis to abuse or discriminate against people really need to be horsewhipped. Ooh, did I say that out loud?
I think you did. I like horses. I don't think we should whip them.
Well, we might have damage the whip. But okay, let me go on something you said there, and let me use a term that I prefer. And I'll let you know up front. I am a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist. I think capitalism is the ideal economic system, but we don't have capitalism. We have crony capitalism. No. We have state capitalism. China is not a capitalist country. The United States is not a capitalist country. If it was a capitalist country, we wouldn't have parastatals that control 2/3 of the home mortgages in this country. So you said crisis capitalism. I prefer to use the term crony capitalism because it's not true capitalism, and it throws shade on a very functional system because the market will determine, not the state. The state's job is to make sure it's fair in capitalism. But what we have here is a whole bunch of players who've profited immensely from this. Let me just run through a short list of players. Let's see, FedEx, DHL, UPS, Amazon, Take-A-Lot. Shall I continue? You see, these are people who are making billions of dollars, trillions probably at this point, from the misery. Meanwhile, these are all big corporate entities. And we see, like in the U.S., the airlines being bailed out repeatedly by government. Now, in this is a case where I'm kind of torn because government wouldn't let people get on planes. So, of course, airlines are going to lose money. So it's not the airline's fault. I don't like bailouts, but this one, a normal bailout, I just go after them. Like SAA, let it die. This ego project of a state carrier is ridiculous. So I'm kind of torn on that one, but I don't like bailouts. But bailing out the airlines, bailing out industry, all the big ones. But who's suffering? Small businesses, independent owners, people who work hard and put their blood, sweat, and toil into building a restaurant or a hotel or a bed and breakfast or a farm or something like that. They're the ones being left behind, they and the poor. And that's incredibly frustrating. So did I cross a barrier with you there where we disagree on capitalism, or are we still chatting here?
Look, perhaps we're still, slightly overlapping in terms of the terminology. But for me, trickle down economy is what it's about. They tell you the wealth is going to trickle down. It never does. In fact, the wealth just gets
that's not
more
capitalism.
and more.
But that's not capitalism.
The wealth gets more and more concentrated. I was watching a program the other day in which they said of the world's 100 top economies, the biggest economies, 51 are corporate. 51.
51 corporate entities are larger than the national gross domestic product of countries around the world, correct?
That's it. I mean, what does that exactly tell you? We don't have democracies. We have corporatocracy. It is the corporates that are in charge. They're so good at hiding behind the curtain. But certainly it's time for us to move that curtain and realize the insidious influence they have in our lives. I mean, Africa's not poor, Chris, you know this. No. We have resources. We have minerals. We have talent. We have all sorts of resources and gifts, and we're not a third world country. What's happening is that this continent is being pillaged, and not enough of the benefit. There's no equilibrium in terms of what's put in and what's taken out. You cannot compare. And as long as that continues to happen, we have people selling our people out, it's going to get worse. It's almost scary every time we discover another natural resource or another something fantastic. You've got to think, what's going to happen next? And it's not always an overt thing. It's not always a hostile takeover. It's the corporates that are operating in soft takeovers of countries' resources. And it's the same in America, and it's the same around South America, and it's the same around the world. It's the people versus the corporates, and it's these governments, these corrupt governments in between that operate as managing agents and stand in front of us and smile as if they actually care.
No, they don't care. The ANC cares about 560,000 cadres, and that's about it. The other 0.2 million South Africans can foot sec as far as they're concerned. And they don't care whether you're black, brown, or white. But they will use that as a tool to pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, the great and powerful Oz, while they're over here stealing everything and doing, I get where you're coming from. And I can certainly see the cynicism in South Africa because there definitely has been some sort of undeclared, dirty sort of approach to perpetuating things the way they are. It definitely is a point. There's no reason that 27 years after the end of apartheid, in a country with the resources South Africa has, that people should be living in poverty. Now, there'll always be people living in poverty because poverty is sometimes the circumstance of bad decisions by people. People make mistakes, make decisions, but most people, especially in South Africa, it's not a consequence of that. So there's no reason for people to be in poverty, that many people. $7.1 billion to buy Gripen fighters, Type 209 diesel submarines. And I mean, I'm in the military, and I shook my head at that. I was working at Defense Intelligence Agency, like, why are they spending? It was only 3.8 billion, but it became 7.1 by the time they're done. And nobody's in jail over the bribes that Thales paid the French firm to Sheikh Shabir, who's not even in jail, and to Jacob Zuma, and the list goes on and on. It's I get your cynicism. I certainly see that. And then Travelgate, Oilgate, they sell off the National Oil Reserve to a corrupt BE tender company, and nobody even shakes the e-toll scam, which has lost money. It's lost money because people stole from it. and Conla, Shelly, I mean, you talk about that. I mean, and it just list goes on. And not even talking about the idiocy. Let's and I'll get back to you in a second here, and so I don't drone on. But in Gauteng, 4 months after the virus has a shutdown where everybody has to stay in their homes initially, that was the rule. You couldn't go anywhere. And the schools are closed. Nobody's in the schools. 4 or 5 months later, they're paying 551 million rand, R500 million, to sanitize schools. Listen, you and I could go into the schools with a brush and a mop and clean it up for a couple thousand rand and make money and be happy about it. R500 million, that would have paid for bursaries for thousands of university students. That would have paid for electrification of entire villages. That would have fixed roads in South Africa. So I get your cynicism. I get it. But I don't blame it. And in South Africa, I can see blame more on the corporations, but I definitely lay the blame at the foot of the government because the government is the one that has the political power and they're not exercising it properly.
Well, I don't know if it's cynicism. For me, it's more enlightenment and empowerment. I don't see it as being cynical. I think knowledge is power. And when we know what we're dealing with, then we're able to deal with the issue. But again, I think the state is a vehicle. I think that corporate influence bribes people and corrupts people and turns people into these monsters that really don't care about how their actions affect anybody else. And you're absolutely right about, the list is so long that we can talk until 2022 and the list would still continue. And again, I'm going to repeat it. It's the same with the ANC. It's just the same with the DA. It's just that maybe the DA doesn't get caught as much because no political party can function without the type of funding that you get from corporates. None of them. None of them can function. None of them can have their fancy things. None of them can look down on us. But again, part of the issue is the so-called middle class that says, it's divided from the rest, right? Divided from the poor by saying, oh, these students want free education, I've got to pay taxes, blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't have to pay the taxes that you pay as the so-called middle class debt slaves if the corporates at the top were paying the kind of taxes that they should be paying. Your problem is not the poor. Your problem is those buggers at the top that are hiding money overseas, that are not paying proper taxes, but through their lovely PR campaigns and their crumbs in terms of CSI programs make you think that they're your friend. They're actually not. So actual rational, critical thinking has got to be done about these issues. And I think the system gets very nervous when we start to ask these questions and talk about these things. But what other option do we have? We can't wait for it to get any better. It certainly isn't going to get any better. And we certainly can't make government in charge of making decisions about what schools need when our children have put latrines or no toilets at all.
Yeah.
No toilets at all.
Absolutely. Now, it's crazy to see kids in the Eastern Cape dying in pit latrines. I mean, what the hell is that? I mean, what would that have cost South Africa? $50 million to install flush toilets in all of its public schools, another $100 million to electrify them over the last 27 years. And what gets me is it's very frustrating on a lot of levels. I mean, you see in KZN there in the past decade during the state capture era of Zuma, in which lots of ANC ward councillors were assassinated by other ANC members. And why? Because in their warped minds, instead of aspiring to be a fireman or a doctor or a teacher or a nurse or a business entrepreneur, they see the path to power that so many people in Africa unfortunately see, and that's to have a political seat. And if you get a political seat, then you can get your hands on the tenders, and then you get your little bakshish coming from the tender this way. So they murder people. I mean, I remember a ward councillor in a town in KZN who had 3 children, and he was very popular and apparently very effective. But they drive by the school where he's meeting with parents one night and spray the building with AK-47s. Fortunately, they only killed him. They didn't kill any of the other people there. But I mean, that's an incredibly warped sense of morality and what's right and wrong. And that's kind of where we've gotten to because probably because, as you're talking, there's this cabal between corporatists and politicians. It's really scary in South Africa. But not just there.
It is, yeah. No, it is very scary, Chris. I mean, some really good politicians have been assassinated, but similarly among civic movements like Abahlali Basim Dondolo, which is a shacklerless movement in our country, doing amazing work. They've had their leaders assassinated, Similarly, in Cape Town with the whole Strand container, we've heard about that debacle where the homeless were kettled together in these like concentration camp type environments and beaten and whatnot. Have also suffered. So certainly the system itself is violence, poverty is violence, dependence on government is a form of violence. And
Oops, did we lose her? I think her signal froze there. Oops. Okay, hopefully we'll have her back in just a moment. Looks like her signal dropped off. Oh, there.
I'm not sure what happened there.
Well, that would be the state censors popping in.
Yes. I have no doubt.
In real time, or your mobile provider is cell C. Maybe that's the problem. Yeah.
Another corporate issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's here's the thing about it. A lot of people don't realize. So you may know this, but although I'm a capitalist, I'm a real capitalist, not one of these fake capitalists. And so when I look at South Africa, people think, wow, we have all these different stores and retail brands. If you pull the curtain back, you realize like the Foschini Group and Edgar's, they own almost everything. There's only a handful of corporate entities that own all these different brands. And people don't realize, when you see all these sports stores and clothing stores and department stores, and you start pulling it back, and the same with restaurants. So many of these brands are all owned by one entity or another entity. And it's really an oligarchy in many respects in South Africa when it comes to your businesses.
That's exactly what it is. It is an oligarchy. And I think lockdown has proved that to us more than anything else, with these companies collapsing and more and more people being put out of jobs and becoming, debt slaves and homeless, et cetera, and it's just going to continue on that trajectory. So it's very important for us to pull back and realize who's at the top. The same with all of these industries. It's also the same with the media, Chris, where if you pull back behind who's the shareholders of these media companies, it's the same shareholder as that industry and that industry and that industry. And so you understand how the media narrative is actually shaped, what drives the agenda. What some journalists don't even call it mainstream anymore, or commercial anymore. They call it old media. Certainly during lockdown, independent, alternative, journalism has thankfully really grown and research, and it's important for what you and I do. It's really important. But you're quite right. The oligarchy is, for me, it's that 1 to 10% that we've got to keep our eye on. They are ruthless. They don't care. I wonder if they even have any souls or conscience. I don't think so. The number of people that have been, fired, left penniless, I don't think they actually care. But it's been creeping on us, Chris. This concentration didn't just happen overnight. It's been creeping and we haven't realized what's going on. And then suddenly we wake up and think, well, what happened? But we're in 2021 now, and it's about time we realize what's going on and we take back our freedoms. What does the Constitution mean? Whether it's here or in America, what does that Constitution mean? If Flint in Michigan doesn't have proper running water, the running water is dirty, it's toxic, it's poisoning the people. I mean, that's just one issue in American politics. It's not really politics, it's human rights that's turned into a political issue, right? There's homeless people in America. There's veterans in America who are disabled and have PTSD. What happened to, sign up for the army? We care about you, etc. It's got nothing to do with that. They bribe people to join in the hopes of getting an education or, paying off their debt. These military, many of them are so young and naive, end up traumatized, end up disabled. They come back, they don't have jobs, they're out on the streets. And that's the case around the world. The system chews us up and splits us out. If you're lucky, you might find an alternative way of surviving, but not everybody is that lucky. And I think it's our responsibility as people who are aware of what's going on to awaken other people and to protect each other.
Well, just one point of clarification regarding the United States for veterans and for those who are homeless. There's no excuse for any veteran who desires not to be homeless in this country. There's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline that's available. It's toll free. You call it up, and if you don't have a place, I know we have a veteran here who was discharged recently from Korea, has some mental health issues, and transitioned to civilian life, did not have a home. I'm involved with veterans organizations. Contacted the Veterans Administration. He was in a hotel that day, and the Veterans Administration paid to keep him in a hotel until they could find a house for him, and they have a process to ensure. So there's no reason. Now, going back after Vietnam, that was certainly the case, but with the all-volunteer force, that has not been the case for the last 2 decades, mostly because of political guilt over sending us off to be blown apart in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, but the point is in this country, for clarity, so people know, there is no reason for anybody to be homeless is a veteran in this country. That's something the country does pay back. In the past, that wasn't the case, and it's certainly not the case in South Africa, but it is the case here in the U.S. now. And so I'm not being defensive. I'm just, because of interest of full disclosure, I'm being honest.
I understand. Yeah. I understand. My point is that homelessness is an all-time high. In America, the banks are foreclosing people's homes and taking them away. They knew it was going to happen. We're going to grab it all. We're going to put you under lockdown. We're not going to let you earn an income, and then we're going to take all of your property. And then you're going to be dependent on the state, which is going to pay you, 350 rands in South African terms to survive. How is that supposed to work?
No, it doesn't work. In fact, in the U.S., we do have a rash of homelessness, particularly in the West Coast. But that has a lot to do with politics, less to do with economics. Unemployment was below 4% in this country before COVID hit. Wealth disparity had decreased in the last 4 years significantly. And the key thing is that in the West Coast, what happens is you have spatial issues by the way that cities zone areas and keep places prohibitively expensive. So like in San Francisco, a lot of people work in Silicon Valley, and if they mop floors or if they work in a restaurant, they can't afford to live there because the rents and mortgages are too high. So they're forced to drive from further away. And you have this, or you have people paying rents they can't afford, too much of their income. So there's reasons behind it. Doesn't make it any better. But also you have a state like California that actually doesn't do anything about it. They create the problem and then they kind of exacerbate it. It's very frustrating. There are very few. I know of one homeless person in this. I mean, there's probably more in this county, but I know of one homeless person, and that lady has mental health issues, and people try to help her, and she like freaks out and chases them away and that sort of thing. But it's a real problem. The things you're talking about, generally a problem around the world, and we certainly have our share of problems here in the U.S., and we could talk about those for hours, and I do on my program usually. But let's shift again before we run out of time here to talk about tomorrow. So you're obviously quite passionate about these issues that you think are very important, and I agree with you. These are very important issues, and it also seems you're very clear about why you think it's happening, who you're responsible for it. But tomorrow, a lot of people are saying, well, nobody's going to show up, or a lot of people are going to show up. And what I'm telling people is that the number of people that show up shouldn't be an indicator of success or failure. The actual events occurring, I think, is an indicator of success, because you have authorities who are limiting capacity. You have authorities threatening arrest. You have authorities controlling things in different places around the world. And so my take on tomorrow is that you want to have as broad, diverse a segment of society that can show up, be aware of this, have their voices heard, and then hopefully get the correct message across. Would you agree with what I said, or do you think that we have to have a certain number or a certain outcome?
No, that's exactly it. Whether you're in a minority of one, whether you're in a group of 10, in a crowd of 100, the point is that you're taking a principled stand as a human being. Your voice matters, your life matters, and that's what it's about. And hopefully the people who come tomorrow will take the message back into their communities that, hang on, none of this dystopian nightmare had to happen in the first place. It's all wrong. Everything is upside down. We're not crazy. This is not the way it's supposed to be. But also, Chris, what I really love about tomorrow's initiative is this connection with all these countries around the world across these borders that I could, in many senses, artificial borders or borders that have been created through war and conflict, right? We're ignoring all of that. We're saying we're the people of this world. It's one tiny planet that we have, and we are uniting across all of these countries, all of these cities in one voice to say we want our freedom back. We want human rights back. We want dignity back. We want to be able to love and care for each other. That's got to mean something. So again, I don't really care about the numbers. And of course, in the digital era now, we'll be able to connect with each other using live streaming, etc., etc. So we'll be connecting with people everywhere around the world. And the real number is that number, the number of people who connect with each other around the world. That's the number that's important.
No, I agree with you 100%. And that's one of the reasons why, of course, my focus is on Africa and Southern Africa in particular, especially South Africa. And that's why I'm focusing on events there. But it's also to bring the attention to this, because this is almost uncovered, not covered at all. Here, uncovered is the wrong word, but not covered by anyone in the U.S. Almost no one knows this is happening in the U.S. It is happening in a few locations I'm aware of, but there's no big. But in many countries around the world, there's massive upwelling of interest in this, despite the fact there's been essentially a media blackout of it. So I of course will be covering. I'll make sure I send you a link in case you want to pop on a Zoom session. I'm gonna have my Zoom open. I'll be streaming starting at 3:30 in the morning for me, which is 9:30 your time.
Yeah.
And I had planned to go for 4 hours, but it looks like the Bloemfontein rally may or may not be happening. If it doesn't happen, then I probably won't go for 4 hours. But that's not a big deal. My longest stream is almost 10 hours during the elections of 2020. I did a live stream for almost 10 hours. So so 4 hours is that's a piece of cake.
I don't know if that's commitment or what, Chris, but well done. Do you want to just check out some of the comments before we say goodbye? There's quite a few of them. I don't want to ignore anybody.
Yeah, sure. Usually I bring the comments in, but we've had a good conversation. So go ahead. Any ones you see that you want to bring in, go ahead and do it.
Wow. There's a lot here. There's a lot here. Let's see.
Well, some of it's people arguing with each other, but some of it's questions to you.
Yeah. So I'm looking for the questions to me.
Well, there was a question earlier. Let me see if I can find that. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, please continue. If you find something, let me know. I'm seeing the pharmaceutical company issues. I've watched this for decades now. Thank you, Hendo. Absolutely agree. Agreeing on the corporate corruption. Let's see. Saskia says Shabnam won't go into SPM, won't go into politics. If I know her enough, she's bigger plans in politics. Absolutely. Politics is a trick. It's more like politics than politics. So I wouldn't waste my time. I wouldn't waste my time getting caught up in that system. Let's see. Talking about equality, talking about sharing tomorrow's event. Yes, people, please share. Greetings from Cape Town. We'll continue. Of course, our People's Medicine campaign is running concurrently tomorrow, Chris. So we'll be sharing flyers, information flyers, and ivermectin stickers, having conversations with people. It's a great opportunity to meet more people. Joking atheist said, my thinking is that this must not rely on a top-down solution to the African problems. It can only fix them. Of course, we can only fix it from the bottom up. When we fix the bottom, everything gets fixed. Comments about Eskom, or whatever you want to call them, the Prince of Darkness, as some people call them. But again, deliberate collapse there as well. I don't know who Olaf is. He's getting quite a bit of attention there.
Yeah, Olaf is a long time viewer in the program. Olaf, he's been with me since the first 100 or so people watching my program.
Hi, hello Olaf, and then of course Bill Gates, and of course philanthrocapitalism, right? Controlling the WHO, controlling the media, controlling the narrative. People are so awake to this now. It's not a conspiracy theory. The numbers speak for itself. Even our health authorities are captured by Bill Gates and friends.
Joking atheist had a question for you earlier, and this is the one I wanted to get out, but we got off. So he asked a question for you. Said, how did great corporates gain their wealth and power in the first place? I assume he's talking about South Africa. Do you have a sense of that? Because I do, but I'll let you go ahead and take that one. How did these corporates gain all this power?
Well, I think they identify, some sort of desperation and need. And then they also identify which political parties or political party players are going to help them tap into that need and become the solution provider and allow them to extract as much wealth out of that particular tender, contract, or deal as possible. That's what they do. And of course, they use a lot of PR and media to hype it up and talk about this great need for this particular solution that they have. And it sounds all fantastic. And all the journalists buy into it and don't ask questions, like for the example, the great Africa trade deal. Nobody was asking questions. Wow, it's a great trade deal. What does it actually mean, right? I think we interviewed somebody on that the other day. Yeah. What does it actually mean? No one's asking that. It's all uncritical, reading the PR release and asking.
We've got a piece of paper signed, so poverty is resolved, please.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Those pieces of paper are the biggest problem because nobody questions them. It's like these non-disclosure agreements with the pharmaceutical companies. We don't even know what's in those deals, Chris. We don't know. And they tell us this is normal. I did not consent. You did not consent. So certainly that's how I think they derive their power. They identify a need. They infiltrate political parties and use their influence there. And then they exploit the media to give them, some sort of brand value and acceptance.
Yeah, that's absolutely. That's well said. Now, I would say this to answer Joking Atheist's question. I think that part of the issue here is that a lot of the interests that we're talking about here, and now listen, this is coming from a capitalist, but I don't see South Africa as a capitalist market. It's a very skewed market. A lot of this is related to large corporations that existed before the end of apartheid and retain their interest in the economy and their degree of control over the economy by working out an informal deal with the ruling African National Congress. And so one of those deals was that they agreed in order to allow things to have. So for instance, let me digress for a second there. There are like 5 major banks in South Africa. In order to use a credit card in South Africa, you have to pay like a 5% fee. Now, you're not paying it. The merchant's paying it. Do you know that Visa charges an average and MasterCard 1.8% for a transaction here in the United States? Now, some businesses are higher or lower because of risk, but the average is 1.8%. 1.8% versus 5%. That is a break on economic activity. If a hotel has to pay 5% of their bill to the bank just because they use a credit card for that convenience, and most people are going to use credit cards these days, you're really harming the businesses. And they're just fleecing money from the economy. And the other thing is that I used to go to South Africa, I used to take wads of cash because I couldn't use my credit cards to buy petrol in South Africa because only debit cards, and I didn't have a South African bank card when I lived in Botswana. So I would have to carry wads of cash, making myself a potential victim. I already had a V8 Toyota 4Runner, left-hand drive, which is a nice target for thieves and for carjacking in South Africa. On top of that, carrying all that cash. So the banks have a cabal. They control things. And so what's happened is that a lot of these corporate entities have kept and perpetuated this. Now, the way they did it early from 94 to 99 was that they agreed to be shook down. They paid greenmail. They gave equity stakes to the likes of Cyril Ramaphosa and to Tokyo Sexwale and to all these other elites who the ANC was trying to keep out of politics, but still keep them close. And so you created a nouveau riche class of black elites by taking equity from Old Mutual, from Anglo American, from Sanlam. The list goes on and on. So instead of putting money into a national sovereign wealth fund for the benefit of all South Africans, they gave it to the elites. And this perpetuated this up until the state capture era. Since then, it's been a whole different story. It's been even worse. But my argument is that these corporate entities have always been there. And I'm not against corporations. I have a much softer tone than my guest does. But this is just the reality in South Africa, and people don't see it. Did I miss something? Are you with me on that one?
No, that's exactly it. We've been in a perpetual state of state capture. But again, I'll say it's not just South Africa. It's just about every country around the world. The influence is insidious. They will bribe you. They will corrupt you. They will manipulate you. They will threaten you. They will take you out if you don't do what it is they want you to do. The role of the banks that you brought up is an absolutely brilliant point. Most people don't want to tackle the role of these banks in controlling global economies, in collapsing economies, the role of Moody's, which downgrades the country if you don't do what it is that the handlers want you to do. So, I mean, there's all of these issues which too few people are aware of, but I think more people are becoming aware of. And it's exactly why, Chris, people like Chris Hani and Steve Biko were taken out, because they were not for that kind of system that favored the elite over everybody else. They were not for that system. They would have been dangerous for the system, which is why they were taken out. But, you know, we find inspiration in these stories and in these leaders around the world. And we need to build on that to create the kind of world that we need, we want, and we deserve.
Well, I think a lot of my viewers know this, but when it comes to Steve Biko, nothing but respect. Anyone that tells people they shouldn't be ashamed of who they are because someone else tells them they're ashamed of who they are is got my vote. Chris Hani, a devout communist who had a very different worldview on a system, which is, I think, far worse than what we even have now. Never should have been murdered. That was horrific, but I don't have a lot of empathy for him. But Steve Biko, definitely someone. Now, Trish C said to you, Shabnam, please do a minute of silence for Tanzania President John Magufuli. He solely stood against evil. Trish, we could take a moment of silence for President Magufuli because he's passed away. But honestly, he was a tyrant, and a lot of people are not happy with him. But can we take this moment of silence real quick? Just do that out of respect for him. We'll do that, okay? Well, that really was a moment of silence. We were very quiet there. I saw my earphones are just very silent. But out of respect for President Magufuli, who just passed away on Sunday after a couple weeks of disappearing from the public scene and speculation that he was abroad, that he had died, that he died from Charlie 19. I'm not sure, but he has passed away. Now, you know, the Zulu King just passed away, Goodwill Swelithini there in KZN. 72 from diabetes complications purportedly, but also apparently he tested positive for Charlie 19 before he passed away. So that's unfortunate here. But I don't think they'll be at a loss for finding a successor. He has 14 of his 16 sons surviving him, so I'm sure that we'll hear a successor sometime soon, because apparently he was named before he passed away. Now, one thing I'd like to add here very quickly and get your take on this before we wrap up is that I think one of the most disturbing things about all of this is that, and I think this is one reason why a lot of people are like, whoa, waking up at this point, is that we at least had, with the advent of social media, the erosion of state sovereignty was happening. And I'm not in favor of that necessarily, but state sovereignty, because you lose control. If you can spread the word, you can have people show up in a place or do this. And we saw it in Iran, where hundreds of thousands showed up to protest because of social media. So they shut networks down. But what I'm getting at is the collusion of big tech with governments to suppress free speech and freedom of thought and freedom of assembly. It's just insane. I know that, I don't know if your group has been hit, but I know some groups have been hit on Facebook. All their posts are taken down. They're blocked. They're banned. Yeah. And if you say something that these tech giants who don't make their standards painfully clear against what their narrative is, you get punished. It happened to me. I didn't violate the rules. I appealed it. They rejected my appeal. I have the video. We can watch it. You can see that I didn't do what they accused me of, and still they shut me down. It's very frustrating. And a lot of people are like, well, go to this platform. Well, the problem you don't understand is that the data pipes are all controlled by that small handful of companies still. So, for instance, I said a lot of people are big Trump fans. I said, well, Trump, if he loses election, I said this last summer, he should start a social media company, start a broadcast company. He's got billions of dollars. He could start a media company. He's got so many fans and people that support him that he would have 8 million people sign up within 48 hours, 25 million within a week. That's $6 billion a year in revenue. And he could start, a Twitter-like function, a Facebook-like function, and a YouTube-like function. But you know what? He doesn't control UUNet. He doesn't control Verizon. He doesn't control all the data pipes, the West African cable that comes down to South Africa. People could shut those nodes down and shut you off unless you're on your own satellites. And maybe Elon Musk's Starlink will save us all, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that either. So
I wouldn't. I wouldn't either. So we are living in a technocracy, Chris, but we've got to find alternative ways to communicate with each other. You're right about that.
So, do you agree? Or your thoughts on this concerns about big tech and media as well? Media running a narrative and serving themselves and politicians and corporate elites, vice being the fourth estate, which is to tell the people what's going on and expose corruption, fraud, and misdeeds and unfairness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a compromising of journalists and journalism to not be what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be PR for corporates. It's not supposed to give them an easy time. It's not supposed to cover up. But, there are a lot of good journalists, colleagues of mine, who will reach out and say, I'm so frustrated. My editor is not letting me write about this or talk about that. What do I do? And I feel for them. They're not allowed to ask the questions that they're supposed to ask. Yep. And it's a terrible position for people to actually be in. But you're quite right about this technocracy. It's part of the fascism. And it's I think during lockdown, we've realized what a big problem it is. Anything you talk about, you're not allowed to have an opinion. So what happened to free speech and your constitution? Nobody cares. We've tweeted Facebook Africa and said, stop messing with us. We have a constitution. What are you actually up to? They've got offices here in Johannesburg. But I've been jailed, Facebook jailed more times than I can even count. It's on actually right now. But, I use that time constructively. I'll find another platform. I'll do something else in that meantime. I don't let it bother me too much. But certainly, Facebook has a really big platform. They now own WhatsApp. They own Instagram.
Yep.
So, there's Twitter, but there's problems there as well. They insult your intelligence by telling you whatever you talk about is fake news or it's irresponsible or some fact checker has checked it. What do you mean? Some corporate minion has actually checked it. That's what you actually mean. Yeah. And what I do think that, certain comments are irresponsible or dangerous. What we're talking about is not. It's absolutely not.
This is cogent conversation and open discussion about issues that matter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've allowed them so much of control into our lives. I don't know if you've watched a documentary called The Social Dilemma. What an eye-opener. How they sort of suck you in and you're the product, actually. If you're not paying, you're the product. So they've allowed us to fall in love with the social media. And yes, social media can be used for enormously good things. It's what right-thinking people do with it that matters. But they've got that level of control. We know that they listen in on conversations. That's why when you talk about something, suddenly you'll see an advert for the very same thing. It's a big problem, and it's not nearly being addressed enough as it is. The right to privacy and dignity matters.
Yep.
It's exceptionally important, and it's something that we need to fight for. We've been trying to move our movement and our members to other platforms, but it's difficult because people love Facebook. So now we're moving on Telegram. Elon has got Signal going, etc., etc. We'll have to see, but I do think that to subscribe to a platform that's owned by a tech giant is a problem. Even if they're entrepreneurs that appear to be very cool, that's how Zuckerberg started. I think we need open source, people-built software, communications, and technology. I think that's what we need.
That's brilliant. Let me get through a whole host of comments very quickly here. Then I want to ask you about how your group, because I need your secret, because other than hiring Dominion to increase my subscribers, I'm not so sure I'm going to increase my, I was on fire until I got shut down, and now my subscriber, but you guys went to 100,000. But let me get these comments very quickly. There's a lot of comments here. Trish said, thank you for the moment of silence. And Chanel, how do we make presidents of all countries involved accountable? I think that's a fair question, and you're welcome for the moment of silence. It was genuine on both our parts. Roy Hay says, I would pay to be on Mike Lindell's platforms. Apparently he's going to start something soon. And then there was some really nice comments. I'm trying to find them. They got away. Let me see. Info Swiss Oil says, hi, Shabnam. You're from Durban, my hometown. I didn't know Info Swiss Oil's from there. So Stronger Together left Facebook in 2006. Wow, that's a long time ago. And let's see what else here. And then there was a comment here. It got away from me. It was from Saskia. Saskia said this is a next level discussion, next level conversation. It was very kind of her to say that about our conversation here. And then I just want to make sure I get the rest of them here. Trish says it's a spiritual war. Okay. And Stronger Together agrees with what you had to say. Well, you've had rapid growth for this group despite impediments being put in your way. You've done very well. So if you could share with us why you think so many people rallied to Sahara's cause very quickly in such a short period of time, just a couple of months. I mean, that's amazing how many people have come to your cause and are interested in it. And then if you have any final thoughts, I'm going to have to wrap up because I have another guest at the bottom of the hour. So you've been fantastic. I will make sure I send you the link so that you can jump in on the Zoom if you want at any time during Saturday's events and give us an update if you like. If you're too occupied, that's fine. People will be calling in and I'll be bringing in the conversations as we go. If you have anybody that's there that wants to send small videos, that sort of thing, so we can show footage, anything you like, but I'll make sure I get that to you. And I open the door. You're welcome to come back on the program at any time as a guest if you'd like, and we'll have you back on.
Thank you for that, Chris. I've got another interview coming up at 8 o'clock. So that's going to be an interesting one as well. But the secret, I've got to ask myself, what is the secret to reaching 100,000 members at least? It's determination. It's that South African spirit of Ubuntu and caring about each other. It's about knowing that ivermectin works. Mm-hmm. It's about being frustrated with the corruption and the wool being pulled over our eyes by these different entities, including the mainstream media. It's about wanting to protect each other. And of course, it's about people taking power, people taking responsibility and not saying, I'm waiting for an almighty leader to tell me what I need to do. I don't micromanage. If you're doing the right thing, please go and do it. If you have an initiative, you want to talk about it, let's do it. That kind of thing. So I think that's what people are really intrigued by. And, in terms of our People's Medicine Campaign coordinators, most of them are women that are coordinating across the different provinces. So I think that's certainly very interesting. We just keep going. We post interesting, relevant content when we're not in jail or when our numbers are not being squashed. I mean, that's just, it's incredible. And we're always thinking, is our group going to be taken down? What's going to do it? What's going to be the trigger? Personally, Facebook, I'm speaking to you, I think that would be so stupid. Then you wouldn't know what we're up to. You wouldn't know what our plans are.
Exactly.
Right? Less control over what we're doing.
Look, as a former intelligence officer, the last thing I want to do is silence someone that I want to keep an eye on.
Exactly.
Because then I don't know what they're doing. If they go to ground, how can I find out what they're going to do if I'm worried about them? Yeah. That's the thing I find ironic. And we know that. Yeah. Sorry, Chris. Now, I had a video removed recently from November 12th in which they made a false claim. They didn't even warn me. They just took it down, said you violate this policy. I never violated. I looked at the whole video. There are 17 seconds in there in which I actually refute. Someone claimed that there was fraud related to the choosing, another different word, the choosing in November. Someone claimed there was fraud. And I said, no, I don't see evidence of that. I don't believe that to be the case. And I got removed for that. They took my video down. So, I mean, why are they so concerned about a video that was a live stream on November 12th that nobody's watching. They're going back and pulling things down like that. That's some serious high-level paranoia on the part of these people that are trying to squelch all of us.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow, Chris, I can't believe a video like that was taken down. That's your opinion. I don't understand the issue with that.
Well,
yeah.
but my opinion actually was in accord with what they wanted people to think.
Yeah. So how does that make sense?
It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so yeah, it's crazy.
But I must say, Chris, we're doing something right if we're being censored. You've got to look at it that way.
Maybe they're scared of us. Maybe they're scared of us. Well, listen, I got to share you one last thing here. So Saskia Langefeld, of course, is a bit of a fanboy. We know this. So I got to say this. She said, SPM is my beloved leader, mentor, and tutor. Honored to be able to say so. Well, there you go. That's pretty awesome.
She's amazing. She just dived into being a community organizer in the most brilliant way. I'm exceptionally proud of her, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else she does to change this world and make it a better place.
Well, she'll be with me on Saturday, popping in from time to time to give me updates about events in Pretoria, so we're looking forward to that. And she literally jumped in the last 10 minutes before my stream on Wednesday when Debbie Ells couldn't make it. Someone contacted her and said, hey, could you go on Chris Wyatt's show? And she's like, yeah. And she came on and she was amazing. I know you were there. You saw the program, so it was awesome. Well,
I saw it. I was really, very proud of her. I mean, she asked me if I want to do it, and I said, no, it's all you. You do it. You enjoy it. You make the most of it. You are empowered. And she knocked it out the park. So I'm very proud.
She really did. And as have you. You've knocked it out of the park as well. Thanks a lot for coming on the program. I really appreciate it. Like I said, open invitation to come back. Just let me know. By the way, you do have a YouTube channel, which I don't think many people know. I found it, and I'm one of the first 50 subscribers. So
thank you. I haven't had time to give it much attention, but it looks like I'm going to have to do that and start a BitChute alternative as well. You know how it works.
BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble. Yep.
That's it. And brand new Tube. That's another one that's pretty cool. But thank you, Chris, for the opportunity, for being so open to these conversations, for supporting our work, as well as, very importantly, the event tomorrow and what's going to happen after.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I'll let you drop off, and then I'll close up the program because I got another guest coming at the bottom of the hour. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right. There we go. All participants. All right. Folks, that was my special feature guest from Durban. It was amazing. Really great that she was with us here. That is, of course, Shabnam Palesa Mohamed, and lovely lady, and quite interesting discussion. I hope you enjoyed it. I have another live stream coming up in 11 minutes. I'm going to end this in just a moment. You're welcome to come back if you like, and that is an interview with Emma Kelly, who is the organizer of the events taking place in Durban, which my previous guest is also involved in. So please tune in. If someone, Daniel or somebody, said they thanked me for making them proud to be South African, I don't know if that was a legitimate thing or it was sarcasm. I hope it wasn't sarcasm, because you should be proud to be a South African. Just because our governments let us down doesn't mean we shouldn't be proud of who we are. We should be proud inside our skin. I have the utmost happiness that I'm an American citizen, and I was born in this country, and I'm proud to be American. The actions of our politicians aren't always something I can hold up for others and go, look, I'm proud that they've done this. But as a nation, the ideals we're founded on, the ideals we aspire to, I have nothing but pride and respect for what it is. Hence the reason I spent 36 and a half years in uniform supporting and defending the Constitution, 23 of those abroad in foreign countries, trying to support and defend the Constitution so that everyone had freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right to seek redress before the government, and all these other inalienable rights that many of us take for granted. And tomorrow, let's not take them for granted. Take advantage of this wherever you are around the world, folks. Go out there and be seen, be heard, and participate if you're able to. Peaceful, lawful assembly of law-abiding citizens simply seeking attention for repression and totalitarianism taking place around the world. Anyway, that's it. It was my guest. And there's Roy Daniel says, right is the correct word, Sakya. What did Sakya say? You mean Saskia? I missed something. Anyway, I've got to end there, folks. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I'll be back in about 10 minutes now. So if you want to come back and catch my next guest, who'll be talking specifically about the Durban. This was a very interesting conversation. We talked about events on Saturday, but we really hit a lot of other bases. The next conversation will be focused mostly on the events of Saturday in Durban. So please tune in for that. And don't forget, tonight, 9:35 South Africa, Botswana, Namibia time, 15:35 Eastern Standard Time, I'll have cowboy action shooters on here. Real cowboys from Wyoming, folks that I was out there with last September in a cowboy action shooting contest. Awesome guys. They'll be on. a father and son combo, and they're really, really wonderful gentlemen. They'll be on here from Wyoming. So tune in for that tonight. It'll be a lekker Freitag evening in Afrikaans. And so please join me for that. And that's it. I will be out of here. Let me just I can get to my right window here, make sure I shut things down properly. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And I'll see you hopefully in about 10 minutes if you can come back. All right, folks, that's it.